Hey there, this is Ross Izzard, and this is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing and why we go fly fishing. So if you guys have watched any of my Instagram posts recently, you probably saw one that featured a couple of fang marks in my hiking pants. And those came from a rattlesnake that I mistakenly ran up on in a canyon. I was out last week hiking around in a canyon that I know fairly well, but have only been in maybe half a dozen or so times. And I'm kind of in the process of mapping this thing out. It's a pretty rough canyon. It's in an arid part of the state, so it's very dry, lots of cacti, not a lot of trees, but features a creek that is full of really beautiful wild trout. And I've been working on exploring this canyon for a while. It's a very sort of spiritual place in a lot of ways. There's a lot of history to it. The canyon used to be used as an old narrow gauge railway line that folks were trying to build to move people and goods down from the mountains and across the frontier. It turned out that the canyon was really kind of too rough for that railway line, and so it would erode, the tracks would fall, the canyon flooded often. And so they eventually sort of abandoned the project, which means that the whole canyon is really uncivilized, but full of sort of these remnants of a time that's passed. So there are old railroad tracks that have collapsed down the slope. There are old structures and buildings and stations in there that have been broken down and dilapidated for 100 years. There are some things that occasionally almost look like a trail, but really aren't a trail because most people don't really go in there. And the few people who do probably stop about a mile in when the canyon is actually about 30 miles long. And it all runs through a wilderness study area. It's very remote. It is not a terribly hospitable place, but it is beautiful. There are these towering rock walls, these incredible rock formations, obviously the cacti and the sand and the heat. I mean, it's a very Western, very untamed place to be. And I love it because it's this exact sort of balance between being oppressive and a little heavy and frankly kind of intimidating sometimes, and also just being full of life. And I'm always kind of struck by how much life is in these places, even in a sort of barren, arid canyon that's full of these sort of shattered remnants of human history. There's still just so much life. There are bugs and there are fish and there are birds and there are snakes, including rattlesnakes, like the one that bit me. And off we go, right? It's a really cool place, but it's very exposed. It's very hot and it's perfect rattlesnake territory. So I was walking along in this canyon. I had fished for the day. I was actually in the process of hiking out, had gone further into the canyon on the downstream side than I had ever gone before. And I was in the process of making my way out. It was about a 3.5, 4 mile hike out of there. Again, no trail. So you're kind of picking your way through this terrain, which is fairly rough. And I'm walking along and I was sort of in la la land. I mean, I was aware enough to be paying attention, but I was thinking about some personal stuff. I was chewing on some things, and I floated just a little bit too close to a shaded bend in the trail. And now, listen, I'm not a snake expert, but I've been around them enough in enough places to know you don't really want to do that, right? Because snakes typically, despite sort of the general canon out there about them, don't spend a lot of time sitting in full direct sunlight in the heat of the day. They prefer sort of shaded areas where they can cool those body temperatures down. And they often will sit on the backside of rocks. And so they don't always sit on the front side of a rock where you can see them. They might sit behind it. They might sit underneath it. But they may be sitting somewhere where you can't see them easily. And of course, they're heavily camouflaged, right? So these are not super easy to spot. And so I was walking along sort of a piece of this shattered old railway line, and I floated just a little bit into a bend in the trail where there was some shade from one of the rock walls. And as I was doing that, I set my foot down next to a rock right there on the side of the track. And sure enough, I heard this incredibly loud hiss. I felt something hit the side of my boot. It felt like being slapped with like a stick, I guess, like somebody slapped you with a reed or a stick. And then I saw a pretty solid size rattlesnake slither off as fast as he could down the slope. And it was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 foot snake. It wasn't a small one. Now, of course, I jumped like 10 feet in the air, right? So if y'all ever wondered what kind of vertical a 220-pound bald white guy has when he gets struck by a rattlesnake, the answer is way higher than you think. I could have jumped over Michael Jordan and slammed a basketball. That's how high I jumped because it really caught me off guard. And then I, of course, sat down, I pulled off my boot, I checked everything for abrasions, I checked myself for bite marks, I checked everything that I possibly could. I sat there for about 20 minutes waiting for any type of symptoms, anything weird. And then eventually, when my heart rate came down and I was able to verify that I was good, I realized that the snake did not get through my wading boot. So, Orvis does not endorse this podcast. I typically don't endorse gear randomly, but the Orvis Pro wading boots that I was wearing stopped a rattlesnake from getting to me. Didn't stop it from ripping two fang-shaped holes in my pants, which you guys saw on that Instagram post, but it did stop it from getting through the boot and to my skin. Now, look, sometimes rattlesnakes bite, and it's what's called a dry bite, which means they don't envenomate you, and they just sort of bite you to teach you a lesson without pumping you full of poison. Looks like that probably was the case with this one, but to be honest with you, I really would rather not have found out. And the truth is, I got lucky, right? I know better than to walk in those areas, but I was distracted and paying attention to something else, and my attention slipped for half a second. I floated into something that, in probably 99 out of 100 times, would have been no big deal. It wasn't a catastrophic error. It wasn't like I was trying to pick up a snake and take a selfie with it. It was just a small mistake in a wild place that resulted in something that could have turned pretty serious, right? This was a couple miles into the canyon, obviously no trails, obviously no people, pretty tough to get to in a rescue scenario. And if you guys know anything about snake bites, once you get bitten, you pretty much just have to sit down. You don't want to be hiking. You don't want to get your heart rate up. You don't want to do anything to speed up the flow of that venom or the spread of that venom in your body. And so I would have been in pretty big trouble. Now, I wasn't far enough away from town where I would not have been rescued. And to be honest, rattlesnakes don't usually kill adult people, even if you're not treated, but they can mess you up pretty bad. And that would not have been the way that I wanted to kick off my backcountry season. So it was a fairly serious thing. And so I hiked out, I calmed down once I realized I was good. I got back to the car, I took some pictures, and I drove home. And on the drive home, I had a chance to think about what the hell I'm doing out there. And that's a really important question. And I think we've touched on it in a lot of episodes. Of course, there was the Ghost, Growth, and Grace episode a couple seasons ago that laid out a case for why backcountry fly fishing in particular is so appealing to so many of us. We've certainly touched upon the psychological and the spiritual and the emotional side of this particular iteration of the sport of fly fishing and why that matters. So we have talked about that, but I don't know that we've ever really fully dug into the idea of judgment and confrontation rather than just beauty. And stick with me here because I know this is a little bit deeper. And today's episode, frankly, is going to be a little bit deeper, right? We've talked about how to fish. We've talked about when something turns into an overnight. We've had some really good technical conversations. And I want to talk about something a little bit deeper today, which is the difference between beauty and judgment and confrontation. And the reason that I bring that up is because I really think it matters, right? So, I mean, I go to a lot of pretty wild places. A lot of you do too, right? That's what we're doing here. And I take pictures and I enjoy the scenery. And of course, these places are beautiful. Now, some of them are beautiful in different ways than others. Some of them are beautiful in a lush, green, full of life sort of way. Some of them are beautiful in a stark, sort of hostile, oppressive way. Others are just generally beautiful because they're unique or because they look different than somewhere else or because they have something special going on, but they are all beautiful. And I think it can be tempting to look at that and to decide that we're out there for beauty and tranquility and peace. And that can be part of it, right? Certainly we like going to pretty places, and there's nothing wrong with seeing that and appreciating it and saying it. Peace can be part of it, certainly. I find a lot of peace in the water, a lot of peace in fishing. And I do think that there's something to be said for tranquility insofar as it goes, where it's quiet and you're insulated from the noise and the pressures of everyday life and whatever complications and drama you have back home with your relationships or your family or your job or your kids or your health or whatever it might be. So I don't mean to say that those things aren't ever part of it, because I think that they are. But that's not really why we go to places that can hurt us or kill us, or really more specifically, reject us, right? Places where not a lot of people go, places where maybe people aren't really supposed to go as often, and places that have real consequence attached to them, places that demand a certain level of respect, of competence, of preparation, of presence, of focus, or they can reject you, and they can reject you in basic ways, which is to say that maybe you don't complete the mission, so to speak. You don't reach the lake, you don't reach the stream. Something happens, you have to bail out, you have to go home. That's one way. They could reject you with some type of an injury because you made a mistake. So, falling down a rocky slope, twisting your ankle, falling into a snow trap door, which I did last season, getting bitten by a rattlesnake because you're not paying attention, which I just did last week. There are a lot of things that can happen in these places that really can reject you from a physical safety standpoint. And then of course there's the mortality piece of this. And this is not something that I want to over dramatize or oversell, because it's really not about us going out there and being super hardcore daredevils risking our lives. It's not really that. And the truth is, in a lot of cases, your life's not in danger in backcountry locations. Now, the risk profile goes up if you're going alone, which I do, and I'll talk more about why I do that here in a little bit. It varies obviously depending on what type of environment you're in, animals around there, weather patterns, conditions. I mean, there's a lot that can happen, right? But all of these places contain in them some kernel of mortality. The understanding that in a place like that, nature is indifferent to you. The place is indifferent to you, and it's full of things that can potentially kill you. They can end your story if you're not careful. Avalanches, rock slides, lightning strikes, animals, floods, whatever it might be, exposure. There's a lot to that. And some people look at that and go, well, then you just shouldn't be there. And okay, I mean, I respect that logic. And if you're looking to live a nice, quiet, safe life, you don't have to go to those places. And look, I won't think any less of you for it. I don't think a lot of people will think less of you for it. And that's okay. But it really is about, for me, not beauty. It's about those pieces, the fact that these things can reject you, and really more specifically, what that rejection implies. And what that rejection implies to me is the concept of confrontation and judgment. Now, let me tell you what I mean by this. What I mean fundamentally is not that we're suicidal, right? It's not that we have a death wish. It's not that we're being reckless. It's not that we're playing with fire. It's not that we're doing something deliberately because we want something bad to happen or because we're testing fate. But I think what we are doing is we're trying to make contact with consequence. Because the real world, to be honest with you, is not full of a lot of consequences. You can mess around quite a bit in regular life without any real consequence. You can be lazy without any real consequence. You can be out of shape without any real consequence. You can be complacent without any real consequence. You can be not terribly competent and not terribly skilled and not terribly knowledgeable without much consequence, because society softens consequence. And in fact, if you want me to get really deep for a minute, if you can excuse the soapbox, we have really built a society that is designed to protect and I think even nurture softness and to minimize consequence and to minimize discomfort and to say it's okay for you not to do hard things or to push yourself or to grow psychologically or to put yourself into uncomfortable situations or to suffer or to deal with hard stuff. Society not only doesn't really do that, but it creates every opportunity for you not to have to do that, right? Video games, TV, electronics, cell phones, restaurants, DoorDash, a million things. I mean, central air and central heating. And listen, there's nothing wrong with all of those things, okay? I use them too. I'm not sitting in a teepee somewhere in the middle of the woods, swearing off everything or pretending like I'm Amish, right? I'm not. I'm not that guy. But I do find that too much exposure to those things starts to dull my edges, right? It makes me a little slower. It makes me a little less tolerant of discomfort. It makes me a little more lazy or complacent, for lack of better terms. It makes it easier for me to slip out of a growth mindset, out of the idea of psychological development, out of the idea of getting better through hard experiences and testing myself through hard experiences. It can make it very easy to slip out of that. And I find that once I've been in that for a while, this happens a lot over the winter when I'm busy and distracted with work and I can't get out as often and there's bad weather and bad conditions and not a lot of streams open, not a lot of options open, I start to get antsy. And it's not just that I'm antsy to go fishing. It is. I mean, I want to go fish. Obviously, I want to be outside. Of course, the surface level pieces are definitely there, definitely part of it. But that's not the only thing. I get antsy because I feel like I start to get out of touch with consequence. And more importantly, I get out of touch with the honesty of consequence. Because let's be real, we all live in lifelong contact with mortality, whether we want to talk about that or not. Everybody's got a ticking clock on them. Life is not unlimited. You only get one of them. I guess if you have a certain belief structure, you might not think that's right, but I think you only get one. And you've got the timer running all the time. So we are, whether we look at it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not, constantly in contact with mortality, with time, with the finite nature of existence. And we know somewhere deep down that life is not inherently safe, or at least it wasn't always meant to be inherently safe. And that means that it can start to feel sort of dishonest in civilized settings if you do it for too long, right? The people are not necessarily honest. The consequences don't exist. The scenarios may not be exactly right. What you hear in the news isn't exactly right. The spin that you read isn't exactly right. And you just start to feel a lack of honesty. And what I find to be the most honest thing in the world is natural places, wild places, and the consequence that they bring with them. These are places that don't have any incentive to lie to you. They're not going to mask anything for you. They're not going to soften for you. They're not going to change for you. They're not going to accommodate you. They don't care about you. And you are either going to show up prepared and ready and skilled and knowledgeable and respectful, or you're going to face consequences. And those consequences are going to be very, very honest. They're not made up. They're not random, at least in the context of unfairly random. Random things can happen to you out there, and that's part of the honesty. But these consequences are honest. They're predictable. You know they're out there. You know that if you show up not ready, you're going to mess around and find out. And you know what? That matters. That is a form of deep reality and a form of genuine authenticity that we often don't find in regular life. And that becomes really, really, really important because there's a central question underneath that, right? If you believe that these places enforce consequences, that they will not soften or change for you, that they are indifferent to you, and that it is incumbent upon you to show up in a way that is respectful and prepared, then they're really asking a question of you. And the question of you is not, can you take nice pictures? Can you catch a lot of fish? Do you like pretty places? Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel peaceful? The question that they ask of you is, are you worthy of experiencing and being in a place like this? And that is not about beauty, and it's not about peace. It's about judgment. And it's not about nature necessarily judging you, because of course nature is indifferent. It's not like it's a deity or an entity that is looking at you and making decisions. It just doesn't care. It's about judgment in an internal way. Do you have what it takes to push into places that are wild and uncomfortable and empty and seldom traveled, and keep yourself safe, keep yourself alive, be successful, be able to operate with a high degree of competence and a high degree of fidelity in those places, and then ultimately come back with stories to share and memories to keep and experiences that you'll never forget? That is the fundamental question. And that's really what I'm looking for out there more often than not. Because, I mean, let's be honest, guys, a pretty lake is nice, but a wild basin, a lake basin that is high up and hostile to you and inhospitable, it can kill you. It has authority. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't negotiate with you. It doesn't need you. It doesn't praise you. It doesn't punish you emotionally. It doesn't ask you to explain yourself. It doesn't ask you for excuses. It doesn't accept excuses. Same with a canyon. These places just simply exist. And when you step into them, they offer a really, really clean question, cleaner than almost any question you'll ever get. Who are you, and are you worthy of being here today? And that is not a judgment against you as a person. It is not a comparative judgment as you relate to other outdoorsmen or other people. It doesn't mean that you're better or worse than someone else. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily a better person because you do this and someone else might choose some other way to grow. But it does mean that there is something to be said for the presence of risk, the presence of genuine consequence, and what those mean for you as a human being. And there's a lot buried in there. And it's really interesting to me because I have found that as my love for backcountry fly fishing has grown and developed and deepened, I have really come to believe and to see pretty clearly that as life gets harder, death. So, for instance, the death of my mother, which I talk about often. In fact, this canyon where I had hiked in and got hit by that rattlesnake, I had hiked in specifically on my mom's death anniversary to do a special ritual I do every year where I spend some time sitting in the water, thinking about her, maybe talking to her, and then letting a single flower go in the current. That's what I was in there for. So there's a lot of grief in that, a lot of promises that I made there that I'm still thinking about, but also other parts of my life that need to be thought about, right? So, for instance, I've been through divorce, and that is kind of a rough experience, right? And trying to work your way through all of that. I've had business struggles in my main business, which have leveled out, but for a long time were hard. I've had relationship issues separately with my family, with significant others, with my children, with people I work with colleagues, with acquaintances, with whoever. That stuff happens pretty regularly. And there is stuff that comes up in life. The older you get, the more complicated life gets. But also, the more equipped you are to go out and to handle it, especially if you have been willing to go out and test yourself and grow, not just stay stagnant, but really level up so you're ready for the next round of challenges. And my time out in the wilderness, my time in the backcountry is really about that leveling up. And I've noticed that as things have gotten heavier or murkier or tougher to parse out, when there are not really any simple answers anymore, when I can't just shrug my shoulders or blame my parents or talk about my trauma or come up with anything else that looks like a rationalization or an excuse, I find myself pushing harder and deeper into wilderness areas because they give shape to the things that I feel and the things that I know, which is after all of these things, all the challenges, all the things I've experienced, the grief, the loss, the uncertainty, the fear, everything like that, as well as the joy and the happiness and everything else. These places give shape to those emotions, right? They sort of trace around the outlines of what life and what existence really are. And they tell you life is not safe. You are not promised absolute peace or comfort. Time runs out. Love is not guaranteed. Not every good thing lasts. And in the end, you're still going to be okay. Strength matters. Competence matters. Your level of internal growth matters. Your level of emotional containment matters. Your ability to sort through difficult things matters. Your ability to solve problems matters. Your ability to exist in harsh environments and then work your way through them, succeed in them, and come home matters. Your ability to build yourself into the person that you would like to be matters. And so when I look at these places, I see them as not just a proving ground and not just a crucible, but places that allow me to really reflect on and confront the hard things in my life, in my mind, in my spirit, in my heart that need to be confronted, not necessarily just in a therapy sense where you sit down and you talk about them and you figure out your patterns. That's certainly valuable. And look, I'm never going to bash therapy. You should absolutely do it. It's helpful. I'm in therapy. Lots of people who I know who are focused on growth are in therapy. Nothing wrong with it. But therapy is a specific thing. It's about identifying and working through patterns through speech. The wilderness doesn't really do that. It judges action, not speech, not feelings, not what you want, not desires, but action. It judges whether or not you brought the stuff that you needed to bring, whether or not you had the training that you need to have, whether or not you were paying enough attention to not set your foot next to a rattlesnake hiding behind a rock on the side of a trail, whether or not you were smart enough to not go walk over a snowbank that looked unstable, whether or not you were smart enough to avoid that avalanche chute that looked unstable, whether or not you know enough about weather and exposure and environment to keep yourself out of a bad situation, and ultimately, yeah, whether or not you can get into these places, even if you've never seen them before, and get your flies out, put your rod up, and catch fish, as well as surviving and succeeding in these environments. And I think there's really something to that. And so when I go out, I'm really not looking for necessarily a beautiful place. In fact, I sometimes get sort of bored and turned off by the idea of just fishing in a beautiful place. I'm not looking for easy places most of the time. And there's nothing wrong with fishing in an easy place. Health varies, age varies, situation varies, geography varies. So there's nothing wrong with that. If your version of backcountry is that you go a mile from the truck in a fairly safe, easy, accessible place, dude, look, as long as you are doing that, you're enjoying it, you're loving it, and you feel like it is providing you with the growth and the learning and the quiet that you need to do your thing, I'm here for that. And I'm not here to judge you for it. But for me, I get weird about easy places, not because I don't enjoy fishing, and I do occasionally go do easy trips if I don't have a lot of time or if I just need a minute or if I really am just looking for peace or tranquility. But I tend to avoid them. And I tend to go seek out places that include some level of risk, some level of isolation, some level of mystery, and some level of judgment where if I get it wrong, they could go bad. And, I tell that to people and they're often like, well, this guy is crazy. He's kind of psychotic, especially because I tend to go alone. And by the way, I should mention that the solo aspect of this for me is huge because when you're by yourself, you don't have anybody to carry this stuff for you. You don't have someone to check your logic. You don't have somebody to tell you that's a bad idea. You don't have somebody to call for help if you get in trouble. You don't have someone to help you use gear that you don't know how to use. You don't have somebody who can help you solve a problem that you've never seen before. You just don't have anybody. You have yourself. And that forces self-reliance in a way that almost nothing ever will. And listen, if you are not comfortable with that or not prepared for it, or you don't have the training, or you don't have the gear, or you don't have the experience, I am absolutely not advocating for you to go out by yourself and be stupid because that can be really dangerous. But to the extent that you are really developing along those pathways and you do have all those things locked down, there is an enormous amount of self-reliance and self-trust that comes from being in those situations in those places alone that then translates into the rest of your life, right? You're suddenly able to trust yourself with harder decisions in business or in work or in love or in relationships or wherever you might be because you've learned over the course of many, 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 many reps that you can enter a place that is indifferent to you, unpredictable, that might throw something at you that you don't know fully about, that you can't actually sort of see in your crystal ball. And you're just going to have to figure it out. And you're going to figure it out because you figured it out the last 50 times or 100 times or 1,000 times. And man, that is an incredible level of growth. But I just don't feel like I find that same thing in easy places. And that is why, even though people think that I'm crazy for going to these places at all, much less going there alone, I've had people say, well, why the hell are you out there fishing for like 10-inch trout in a place that is dangerous, dude? You don't have to do that. And the answer to that is because I'm really not out there looking for fish, right? What I'm out there looking for is me. And not just me, but the best possible version of me, the most actualized version of me, the strongest, most competent version of me, and the version of me that trusts myself and knows at the end of the day, when I get back to the car or the truck, no matter how long I was out there, maybe it was a day trip, maybe it was a backpacking trip, maybe I was camping, whatever it might be. When I get back to the car, I know that I went to a place that judged me, that tested me, and that I passed, and that I was worthy of being in that place on that day in that time. And that is a super powerful, incredibly empowering experience that really is at the core of why I do this and the core, I think, of why a lot of you do it. That type of healing, that type of self belief, that type of confidence really is hard to develop almost anywhere else. And I am a huge believer in wilderness as a self development tool. And that is really what it's all about. It's not about beauty, it's about confrontation with hard things and hard places. It's about accepting judgment and consequence. And it's about emerging on the other side better, stronger, and more in touch with yourself at the most basic level that you can be in touch with yourself. So that's why I'm out there. And I think that's worth saying. Sometimes we can lose track of that. We get distracted talking about the fishing parts and the gear parts and the planning parts, and those are all part of it. but they're really only part of this larger constellation. And the larger constellation is you and your growth and your development. And so, guys, when you go out there, wherever you go, even if you're not doing hard backcountry stuff, even if you're doing easier stuff, even if you still think I'm psychotic, which, I mean, let's be real, you might be right. That's okay. But whatever you need to do to fight back against that sort of comfort mentality and the idea that you should never have to face hardship or consequence or risk, I would be so careful with that, because, man, at the bottom of that risk equation is real growth and real happiness. And in the end, even if you don't find it on any given trip, real peace. That's what I'm looking for. If that's what you're looking for, then hey, you're doing it right. Stay on this backcountry trail, and I think you're going to find exactly what you need. Okay, guys, thanks for sticking with me through a heavier episode here. I hope it spoke to you a little bit. If it didn't, that's okay. We all have different thoughts, and our hearts are all a little bit different, but hey, I wanted to share mine with you today. If you get a chance to get out there this week, get out there, challenge yourself, grow a little bit, catch some fish, be safe, and I'll see you back here next week. Till next time, this is Ross. Maybe I'll see you out there. Just remember, it's not all about pretty pictures.